All right, we are pleased to have on today from Prince Albert. He's a Sasky shooter, a legend, has won a lot, and all around a great person. With that, we are pleased to have on today the father of Dave Stewart, Ron Stewart. Ron, thanks for coming on the podcast today.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for inviting me in.
Absolutely. Okay, Ron, so let's get right to it here. What's new with you? How are things? What's going on?
Well, it's time to get back in the gym. It's time to get back in the front of the simulator and sort of got thinking golf again after about a month off due to obviously cold weather and the course being shut down. But it's this time of year where, you're sort of in between seasons and work is busy. And you know what? Our golf season is just so short. We try and pack in so many tournaments and so many rounds into 5 months. I got to live in a place like Birmingham, Alabama, so I can golf year round.
Wow.
Come on down, big boy.
Well, no rest, hey? So right back into the simulator. I love it. Ron, I want to talk about, even backtrack here. A young Ron Stewart, what sorts of hobbies you're up to, activities, what were you doing as a youngster growing up in Prince Albert?
Well, I lived in the west end of PA and I was about a block from our Little League ballpark. So I spent a tremendous amount of time either playing baseball or being at the ballpark. And one of the things about growing up in PA is that that part of our life was a big deal. I mean, it's not there anymore. The park has been really basically knocked down. It's just open space. So I'd go there every evening and I'd lean up against a little 2x4 on this, either in the fall ball side of third base or first base, and chase balls down and take them to the canteen and get 10 cents. Well, that was a bag of seeds and a drink back then. Or every once in a while, there'd be a home run. We'd chase the home run down and we'd hide it in the trees, pretending we couldn't find it. And then after the last game was over, we'd go and steal the ball and take it home. So I'm admitting to a theft when I was about 9 years old, I guess. It was a big part of our life. We've got a field here called Andy's Walk Field, and Andy's Walk was a very prominent name in the ball community of PA. His dad was an umpire, and Andy was a really good player. He went out to Vancouver and played with the Canadians. I think it was AAA back then. So Andy and I lived across the street from each other, so we played a lot of ball together. So it started out as baseball. Golf was very much just took some lessons when I was 11 years old. Played a bit with my buddies, but it really wasn't until later on where golf became more important. But when we had a golf pro here named Hubert Cook, and the course is named after Hubert. And I think Hubert left in 1965 or 67, somewhere in there. And he taught golf lessons to juniors, but he wouldn't teach you if you're left-handed. That was his MO.
Really?
Honestly. If you were left-handed, you didn't get a golf lesson from Hubert Cook. You had to be right-handed. And before our golf course got renovated and sort of is what it is now, we had an old clubhouse that was sort of up on the hill next behind the first tee. And then there was some space in behind it where there was a little chipping green and a putting green and a driving net. And Hubert would take us out to the driving net and, have us hit balls into the net and then make some changes to our swing. And I remember this story very vividly. He would, if you went up there and you took your stance and you gripped the club ready to go, he would look down at you. And if your thumb was down the grip, he would say, "Hey, listen, get your thumb off the grip, put it in the side of the grip, because I got a whole pail of thumbs in the back of my pro shop." Well, we were scared as 11-year-old kids if he'd come out with a knife and chop her thumb off. So that was sort of my indoctrination into a good Varden grip. But he was a unique character. Not only did he not teach left-handers or have any left-handed equipment, he was kind of a grumpy old guy, and juniors had to really watch their step and make sure that you didn't play unless he wanted you to play. And that was usually after 1 o'clock in the afternoons.
That's wild.
I'd say it worked pretty good, whatever lessons he gave you, Ron.
Yeah. So how many guys quit after the lessons when they found about their thumb maybe got cut off?
I don't know. But, we've got some guys that you probably would recognize names of that went through golf lessons around the same time. There's a guy named Bruce Horrocks and a guy named John Foster, Ronnie Harris, Tom Wormworth. Tom's a very prominent guy in the golf community because he's now sort of retiring from being the longtime chairman of our PA Northern. So I grew up in that era, and it was really unique. I don't know if I'd want it now that way, but we couldn't store our clubs at the golf course. So I had to carry my clubs in the back of my bike on my shoulder, riding a bike from the deep west end of PA, which is about a 25-minute bike ride. And that sort of, I guess, taught us some character as much as anything. Used to shag balls for a guy for $1 an hour. I used to caddy for him, and I'd get about $3 a round. And although back then it seemed like, a decent day's wages for caddying, it kind of grew a little bit old. I went from caddying when I was 11 or 12 to probably the most memorable caddying experience that I had was with Debbie Massey in '76 when Debbie won the Canadian Ladies Championship in PA. That's a whole other story. I don't. You want me to get into that?
Yeah, by all means, jump right into it. I love it.
Okay, so Debbie was the U.S. Women's Amateur Champion, and she came up from Pennsylvania with a friend of hers from, last name was Thompson. I forget her first name. Doesn't matter. And she came up to PA to experience golf in a different way. Our course was in great shape. We had a green superintendent called Squeak Nelson. His original first name is Gordy Nelson, but Squeak and I were good friends, and I got to caddy for Debbie because I was a caddy master. So I thought, okay, I'm going to take her. So we went out, played a practice round together, and I soon found out that she could hit it 10 yards past me right off the hop. She shot like 68 in her practice round. She shot 65 in one of the 4 rounds. She only warmed up by hitting 15 or 20 golf balls and went out and played. And after the round, we went in and had a Molson beer. Plug. And Debbie was just a phenomenal talent, and it was just resonate. I remember so vividly that particular time in my life, because I think she made an impact on everybody who she came in contact with. We even took her down to a couple of our local establishments, which aren't really renowned for their ambiance and characters. It was a place where she had never experienced before. And I think that gave her a little bit of PA flavor as well. So that was my last experience with caddying, and certainly something I remember for a long time.
That's awesome.
We could hold a whole podcast on old PA establishments, I'm pretty sure.
Well, I'm going to go through some nicknames, by the way, during the podcast, which if you've ever been to PA or know some of the characters, you may even heard them, and others you're just gonna laugh. They're so funny. Do you want me to get into that?
Well, before we do that, Ron, I want to jump into the move to Ontario. Walk us through that.
Okay. Moved to Ontario after grade 10. I played baseball down there for a couple of summers, played some golf. Couldn't make the golf team. The high school team was pretty good, and I couldn't make the high school golf team. Just sort of played for fun in the summertime, but that was mostly a baseball experience when I wasn't playing football or curling or playing golf. I loved it down there. It was Georgetown, Ontario. Any tournaments we went to, the courses were fantastic. Went and saw Jack Nicklaus play in the 1968 Canadian Open. He came second. Watched him play, which really, I think he became my first idol, the first person I really look up to as being someone I wanted to emulate. And that sort of got me, I think, realizing that golf is a very serious sport, that you have to have a tremendous amount of skill to play, and also you have to have the right mindset. So that was exciting. I watched, there was a player from the US make a hole-in-one on a par 3, Charlie Sifford. That was Charlie Sifford, cigar smoking Charlie Sifford, standing up on a par 3 with a cigar in his mouth, and he knocks it in the hole. Saw that during the round. So memorable spending a couple of years in Ontario, and then came back. And actually Ontario had grade 13 back then. So I was in grade 12 when we moved back to Saskatchewan and I got put back into grade 11. So that was different. So I had to repeat the last half of grade 11, the first half of grade 12, and then graduated that following spring.
Wow.
So that was a little bit of my backstory.
Speaking of baseball, a pretty reliable source told me that you were quite the baseball and football player. Do you want to talk about that for a minute?
Well, I was a pitcher and had the opportunity to go to a Tigers tryout camp when I was about 15 actually. I wasn't supposed to be there because it was for 16 and older guys. And I could throw pretty hard, but I had to really, really rear back and put a lot into it to get the ball over with some speed. And I remember the scout from one of the northeastern pro franchises walked up to the mound, and he kind of looks at me and looks at my hands, looks at my feet, and he says, "Well, how big is your dad?" I said, "My dad's 5'9". He says, "Well, you know, son, you're not going to get any bigger. You're probably going to be as big as you're going to be." And at that time, that was what my size was. And he says, "You have to throw too hard or else you're going to hurt your arm and you'll never have much of a baseball career." So that was kind of the start of the end of baseball. I played some football. I was a quarterback in high school for a couple of years in Ontario and then 1 year in PA. Yeah.
Jeez.
Love it. Okay, well, let's jump into the nicknames. If you want to rip them off, let's get into it.
Oh, nicknames. Okay, well, there you go. I don't know. I'm going to throw one out there. Maybe Torrie knows it. Elk poacher, deer stalker, sewer breath.
I don't know those guys. Well, I might know the guys. I don't know those nicknames.
Those are people's nicknames?
Oh, well, that was one guy's nickname. He had 3 nicknames.
Oh, boy.
First name started with the letter G. Last name started with the letter R. But I'm just going to leave it at that because I don't want to embarrass anybody. His younger brother was Little Sewers because this guy was Sewer Breath. So his little brother was Little Sewers. We had Jutes. We had Sink, Sank, and Sunk. 3 brothers. That's the Harris brothers.
What's Darcy's nickname?
Boogs.
Boogs. Yeah,
Boogs.
I always wonder where that came from.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. Not really sure where that came from. We had Mickey. We had a guy called Banjo Eyes. He also had a nickname he wasn't real proud of. He didn't like too much. His name was Pig Dog. So one day we went out to play a round of golf, and somebody had gone to the 14th hole, and 14 used to be a short par 3, and there was kind of a mound in front of a dirt bunker, and it spray painted the words Pig Dog on this bunker. Well, it didn't go over very well. So he preferred to be called Banjo Eyes over Pig Dog, which I don't know. It doesn't really, neither one's very complimentary. And he had a young son, so we called him Bacon Bits. There's Goose, there's Moon, there's Quarter Moon. There's a guy that came up from Toronto one time, and he was a really good player, but he used to sing in the subways of the Toronto subway system. So we called him Subway Elvis. He spent a year or 2 in PA. Some of our PA guys will remember that. There's Bing, there's Pip, there's the Goat. Actually, the Goat is a guy named Bill Nutting who just recently passed away, and Bill had moved down to Mississippi several years ago and remarried. Bugsy, who is our green superintendent. We had a couple of guys that kind of limped when they walked. So one guy was quarter step and the other guy was half step. And then there was step and a half because he had long strides. There's a guy named Doorknob, Stubby, Foggy, Shaky, Handsome, Greasy Glen, Tibsy, Jung, Bam Bam, Squeak, Pooh, Worms, Groovy, Pistol Pete, and Meathead. So PA's got a unique golf culture. Everybody seems to end up with a nickname.
Well,
so you just have to laugh. I mean, it is what it is, right? I mean, PA it's kind of a different place. We've had a long-standing group of guys that have played golf together called the Syndicate. And the Syndicate has probably been going for 45 years, without a word of lie. 3 times a week they play, both weekend days and usually once during the week. And the Syndicate was a place where if you were a newcomer to PA and you wanted to go out and play a round of golf and play for a few dollars, you showed up at the putting green maybe 20 minutes ahead of our tee times, you'd throw the ball down on the green and it would line up by handicap, and your team would be pulled out by handicap. And away you'd go. You'd end up going to play 18 with maybe 3 guys you'd never played with before. And it was really kind of open to all comers until, of course, we ran out of tee times. So that was, the syndicate has really developed a lot of competitiveness in the mindset of some of our guys here. You've always got a competitive game 2 or 3 times a week. You're always playing for something. You can still have a good time, but it's not like anything life and death. And the stakes really haven't changed a great deal in the last 30 years. It's like $2 front, back, and 18, 50-cent ticks, maybe $1 for 3 in a row, you get $1. So you're never going to win a lot. You're never going to lose a lot. And you always come out of it feeling a little more competitive.
I think that's the biggest. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing too. And we started doing that down here at my club, just getting all the guys. We have a syndicate of 14 players, and it's perfect.
Yeah.
Because it makes you, every shot kind of matters, whether it's a tournament or not. But I mean, it gets that competitive mindset, which is nice. But yeah, PA is doing something up there. I don't know what's in the water, but hell of a golf crew up there. So
yeah, it's there's always been a lot of guys that can play at a pretty high level, and for the most part, nobody is trying to outdo anybody. You just go and play golf, and if you're a young guy and you want to try and get a little more of a competitive edge, then you play in the syndicate, and it makes you better.
Absolutely.
Some of our local members kind of cringe a little bit when you mention the name because they think it's an elitist group that gets preferential treatment and gets preferential tee times, when, hey, you know what, we're getting tee times the same as everybody else, but we're organized.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Ron, I want to talk about SAS Amateurs. How many, and walk us through them?
Okay, 3 of them, a couple of them in PA, one in Saskatoon, 77, 87, and 2007. I think the one in 77 and 2007 were probably the most memorable because they were both in PA. And in 77, I think my game was probably at its best during that time in the mid to late 70s and early 80s. I had 3 rounds in a row in the 60s, and I had a bit of a lead going into round 4, 5, and 6, which were played at City Club. And I remember this pretty well. I went out for a practice round before the last 3 rounds at City Club, and I had shot another good round, and I thought, wow, this is going to be pretty straightforward. All I have to do is, keep it in the fairway and I'll be fine. But then I started to get really tense and really nervous in those last 3 rounds, and I shot like 77, 78, 77, and I missed the team by 1. So I was alternate that year, and it was hard to take. Like, I was not happy. I was pretty down. And I've told this story before, but it's not something that probably many people have ever heard of. But after the round was over and I hopped in my car and was driving home, I had to stop at a Texaco station on Idlewild and pulled in to gas up, and they were giving away steak knives. If you filled your tank, you got a steak knife. Well, I wasn't in the best frame of mind, so I got this steak knife and it sat in the passenger seat the whole time back to PA, thinking of different ways that I could use that steak knife to get rid of my frustrations.
Oh my
God. So that was a little memorable, not in a great way. The one in 07, because Dave and I both made the team that year and it was in PA, it was probably the one that had the most significance, just because of that factor. And I was in my mid 50s, and I didn't think perhaps I'd ever have a chance of doing that well again. So making the team with Dave is probably one of my highlights. Certainly, no question about that. And then we went and played in the Canadian Amateur at Riverside that year. And after round 1, and it was a late finish to round 1, around 7:30ish. I remember going in the scoring tent and I didn't have my glasses on, and I went through my card and signed for a 7. Well, I thought I signed for 77, but they posted a 76. Oh. And went into the clubhouse and they had a big screen with all of the scores kind of rolling through, and I saw 76. And, I didn't shoot 76. I was 77. So I went in to see the RCGA guys, and I said, listen, I think maybe my score might have been added up incorrectly, because I was 77. So he brought out the scorecard, and sure enough, I'd signed for a 4 instead of a 5, and I got DQ'd.
Oh.
Yeah, and that was the first round of 2-round qualifying to get into match play. And 77, and then I shot 76 in round 2, and that would have made match play. That would have made the cut. But they allowed me to play round 2 because it was a team event, and then I could not play match play. So there was some consolation in that, but that was not a happy moment.
For sure.
It happens in golf, right? It only happens once or twice.
To Brandon? Did you ever apologize to Brandon Markey for drilling him in the head with your hat in the parking lot?
I don't remember throwing my hat at his head. I know I threw my hat. I know I probably threw my shoes too. There was some trunk slamming going on after that round.
Some guy from PA told me that. I don't know. He must have been like that.
Well, maybe I blocked that out of my memory. So, Brandon, I apologize.
There you go. Hey, I think one of your most impressive accomplishments is you've won tournaments in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 2010s. Like,
yeah,
that's unbelievable, man. Like I told you, you're Gordie Howe of golf.
Well, I think it just serves more age than anything. I'm creeping in on that 8th century of my life, and I'd like to be able to get one more in the 2020s. But we'll see.
I'm sure you will. Look out, senior Northern.
Well, maybe super seniors. Who knows? Eventually, you get to an age where you outlive everybody, and all you have to do is break 90, and you're going to win a tournament somewhere.
There you go.
Hey, Ron, I wanted to bring up nationals, and I mean, I'm sure you've heard this before, but what did you found what it took to make it? To get there, how hard it was, and even how hard the competition was there.
Yeah. I remember a conversation I had with Jim Sissons, and Jim's the best player that's ever played golf in Saskatchewan, bar none. I don't care what anybody says. And Jim was one of my idols. I played some rounds with him, practice rounds and competitive rounds, and I just marvel at the way he used to strike the ball and the way he can manage the golf course. And he just dissected a golf course, and he doesn't hit it as far as others do, but I'm telling you, nobody hits it straighter. So I remember Jim telling me one time that after he would either make a team or win a provincial amateur, his work had just begun. And so his practice routine would accelerate going into the Canadian amateur, or Canadian mid, or Canadian seniors. And that kind of resonated, because I think a lot of people think, well, once they made the team, then you can start taking some time off. It'd be the complete opposite to what his mindset would be. So I always tried to prepare as best I could, not only for a national tournament, but also for just regular tournaments. I was kind of a practice fiend. I used to put a lot of time in the range and around the short game area, because I think I certainly wasn't gifted with a natural ability to play golf. I think it came through hard work as much as anything, and making sure I didn't have my thumb chopped off when I gripped the club. And so I think that tendency to really enjoy practicing and to know that practicing makes a difference was part of what I had to do. I don't think I did particularly well at the national level, as much as I thought I could play. I think I was always a little disappointed coming back. There was only one tournament that I felt that one national event where I felt I was playing to my potential, and that was the Canadian mid-amateur in Bathurst about 20 years ago. The story there was it was 54 hole qualifying to go into match play. And match play, I recall, I think it was top 16 get into match play. And I found myself in second place, playing in the last group. and playing with guys that obviously wanted to be the low qualifier as much as I did. And on the 17th hole at Bathurst, it's a short par 4, but it's a long par 3. It's about 250, and it kind of angles a little to the right. And on the right-hand side, there's kind of a bay that comes in near the green, and there's some long, very seaweedy grass that was right next to the rough that was just short right of the green. And I kind of cut my tee shot around the corner a little too far, and I hit it in about 8 inches into this long stuff. And the RCGA were following, and there was a few people following, and I was playing with Stu Hamilton. And Stu was, I think he was in the lead by a shot at that point. So I went in to try and play it, and got settled in, took out a pitching wedge, tried to muscle it as hard as I could hit it out of the seaweed, and I broke my hand. I broke the 4th metacarpal, a spiral fracture, and it looked like the knuckle had kind of dislocated. So the RCGA guy came over as I was gripping my hand. He asked me if it was okay, and I said, I think so. So I kind of reset my hand, and then gripped it and hit it on and knocked it in for a bogey. But I had broken my hand, and I couldn't play anymore. I couldn't even pull my driver out of the bag. And so walking up 18, the 54th hole of the 3-round qualifying was a little bit of a tough experience when 2 hours later it was in a cast.
That's
but that was probably the only event that I really felt like I'd played to my potential.
Wow.
That's still pretty incredible.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, the hand still it's kind of a bit of an issue, you know, when the weather gets a little testy, or you hit a shot kind of out of a tough lie, or maybe you hit a root and it just vibrates in the hand. And so it's never really totally come back to normal.
Ron, I have a 2-parter here. Sure. Winning, and obviously when you won your first time, your first event, or whatever it was, and then you found a way to do it time after time after time after again. Walk us through that. And then also, who was someone that you looked up to as a younger player, and then obviously as you got older?
Oh, well, sort of a multi-parted question, I guess. When I first felt I could win, I think my competitive sort of desire level amped up a bit. So I didn't really want to not win. And so preparing for every tournament, whether it's a 2-man best ball or a city open or a Mayday Masters, was just something that, or a Northern, was just something that I felt I really was driven by. So I had a very high level of desire, and consequently was able to eke out maybe a few more that otherwise I'd give away. So the competitive spirit was there. And also I think I was pretty sharp mentally and physically. I could hit shots that just through repetition, through hard work. Guys that look up to, well, again, I think Jim Sissons was a guy that I always looked up to. I felt that, and having played with a guy like Brian Bamford, and Brian no longer plays golf, but Brian was a guy who, from a golf sense, I really looked up to. There were other players in PA named Bordy Adams, who I really looked up to. There was Ted Anir back in the day, who was a great player out of Saskatoon. I kind of looked up to. I looked up to our 2 pros, Danny Jutras and Clayton Robb. I looked up to them as kind of mentors of my golf game. But, you're with a half a dozen other guys at your club that you're all battling for the same position. You're all trying to win the same tournament. So you don't necessarily look up to anybody who's local that of your own age. You just played with them as a way of developing your competitiveness. But I worked with Clayton Robb for 3 or 4 years, and Clayton was a great guy. I just loved him. He's no longer alive. He ended up leaving PA and he went to become the head pro in Calgary at Pinehurst. Pine Brook, not Pinehurst. And then his son, Randy Robb, went on to become a phenomenal player and is very prominent in the Alberta golf scene. I think he's the director of golf at the New Mickelson Golf Academy. Right. I don't know if that answers the question completely, I think what I tried to do is I tried to emulate maybe others, either not from PA or others that I'd played golf with at a national level. One guy who I just marveled at was Doug Roxburgh. I got to play with Doug a couple of rounds at the Canadian Junior back in '69 in Dartmouth. And, you know, his ability to just stripe it down the middle and be so consistent was someone who I really marveled at. I played with Dan Halderson, and I used to, Dan Halderson was a very good pro on the Canadian Tour. I remember one time playing with Dan at the Saskatchewan Open, I think it was 1980, and having teed it up with him in the first 2 rounds, because I think that year I might have done something to qualify to be in that group. And he shot 68 at the Old City Club, and he had 36 putts. And that is not a word of lie.
Not terrible.
He hit every par 5 and 2, and he literally 2-putted every green. He had 36 putts for a 68. And he was just on the Canadian Tour at that time. And Dan no longer is alive, but he just pounded it. And I was always impressed by that. And sometimes maybe a person tends to swing too hard if you think that you got to hit it too far. And with today's technology, you've kind of gotten away from that, where you just by generating speed at impact, you can hit the ball so far. But back in the day when the clubs were not as technologically advanced as they are now, you had to really swing hard to hit the ball a long ways. And Dan was one of those guys.
Awesome. Okay, Ron, off to our segment called Questions from the Gallery, sponsored by Molson Coors. Coors Seltzers on a mission, helping restore fresh water to Canada's river through the Change the Coors Foundation. Enjoy the Coors Seltzer Mixer Pack with 4 great flavors: black cherry, mango, grapefruit, and lemon lime. Please drink and drive responsibly at all times. All right, questions for you, Ron. Sure. Low round and where?
I've had 63 3 times, and they've all been in PA.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Not bad. Hey, Ron, who's longer, Gord Brown or Todd Bergen?
Oh, Todd Bergen. The stories about Todd Bergen. Todd was a guy who, you know, he had a bit of a cup of coffee at the pro level. I think he got the second stage qualifying.
Sorry,
US
Gord.
Open. I'd like to say Gord, but Todd Bergen used to just smash it. He was 350 long back before golf clubs were as advanced as they are now. Really? I think if he was playing today's golf club in his era, and when he was in his peak, he'd hit at 370. He was massively long.
That's silly.
Yeah.
Kate, I don't know if you told this one or not yet, but I want to know how many hole-in-ones, and was there, you might have won a car and a trip. Is that true?
Yeah, I've had 7.
Okay, just 7.
First one was in 74. I remember really well. I was playing with Pete Laconey, Clayton Robb, and Vic Boback. We were all playing best ball golf because we were trying to play in this event called the Peter Jackson Pro-Am. And Peter Jackson Pro-Am back in the 70s was a 2-man best ball, and you had to play these series of matches to qualify to play the Manitoba champion. So we're all playing it on 17. Oh, sorry, I'll backtrack a little bit. Almost a year before that, I bought some insurance from the Continental Hole-in-One Club, which was based out of Vancouver. And the Continental Hole-in-One Club, I didn't know this at the time, had gone bankrupt at about the same time that I got my hole-in-one in PA. And first place, or the first prize, if you got a hole-in-one, was a trip. You could win a trip to Hawaii, or you could take Mexico, or you could take, Halifax. So my wife and I were getting married in 74 at Christmas time. And I got this hole-in-one, and it was about 3 weeks before my insurance expired. So I was ecstatic. I mean, man, I called her and I said, won this trip. We got this hole-in-one. I've got this insurance. I said, come to the bar. We're going to celebrate with a whole bunch of people. And so I ran up a tab in the bar, and next I paid the tab off. I don't even know what it was, a couple, 300. Next morning we call Vancouver and we talked to Stan Leonard, and Stan Leonard who was one of Canada's famous pros, was the face behind the Continental Hole-in-One Club. And I find out that 90% of their claims were faulty. I said, well, what does that mean? I said, well, we can't pay you for anything. We can't give you a trip. We can't do anything. I said, so what do I get? Well, you can charge up to 200 in a pro shop. And I said, really? I said, I've got a bill more than that on the bar. I thought I was going to Hawaii for a honeymoon, and now I can charge a 200 in the pro shop. He says, yep, that's all you get. So that was
what a
I
scam.
went from the penthouse to the outhouse real fast.
Would have tucked it in the court.
No. Yeah. I don't think you'll see Continental Hole-in-One Club emerging anytime soon.
Torrie?
So Ron, did you have any college offers
Back in the
for any
day,
of the sport?
well, in golf, scholarship opportunities weren't like what they are now. There were part scholarships at some Div 1 schools. So my family and I went down to Seattle to meet the golf coach at the University of Washington. And they had a max scholarship of $1,400, which was basically tuition at the US level. And I met the coach. We went to the range. I hit some balls. I came back. He offered a scholarship, but it was about half of that. And my parents said, there's just no way we could justify sending you away to the US with a scholarship that really wasn't going to take care of more than just half of a basic need. So that was it. My marks kind of dropped in high school. The motivation to be a scholar kind of went out the window. So that was a tough time because that happened in the spring of 1970. And then the summer of 1970 was my last year of junior golf. And that was the only scholarship opportunity I had. Unlike today, where you can get headhunters or you can go out and try and get it yourself and have some opportunities at a Div 2 or a Div 1 level. And kids are very fortunate now. At the Div 1 level, where they have 4.5 scholarships on a golf team, split up amongst anywhere from 6 to 10 guys, it is a tough nut to crack. In women's golf, because of Title IX, they have 6 scholarships to give. And sometimes in women's golf, they just barely have 6 players on their team. So if you're a female player and you can break 80, there's a scholarship out there.
Yep.
There really is.
Yep. We could barely fill our women's team.
Yeah, it's just the way it is. And, it's tough. You see these guys playing college golf, and they're from all over the world. They're not playing on full rides. Most of them are playing half rides, 25%. Maybe one guy in the team with a full ride, whether it's UCLA or whether it's the University of Tuktoyaktuk, it doesn't matter. You get 4.5 scholarships and that's it, unless something's changed in the last few years. But there's lots of schools with some scholarship money to offer. And you got to hand it to the young guys now that want to go down there and slug it out and get their degree, because it's a bit of a tough grind. College golf is hard.
Yeah. Okay, Ron, I want to know your ultimate dream foursome.
Jack Nicklaus, definitely. Probably Lee Trevino, and I guess Tiger Woods. Not because I love Tiger Woods, but because I think he changed the game when he came out.
Yeah.
And I guess if you put 3 guys that I'd like to play with, those would be the 3. Met Tiger Woods only once. Didn't introduce myself to him, or didn't even have a conversation with him. We were in Arizona for a college event that Dave was playing in, and it was being played at the Casa Grande location, which is halfway between Phoenix and Tucson. And one of the World Golf Championships were being played in Marana. And it was practice round day. It was a Monday. And my wife and I went out to watch, but we were hoping to see Tiger in his practice round. And he did show up. He showed up a little bit later on, maybe 12:30, 1 o'clock-ish, and we waited around for him. We were just about to leave, and sure enough, out he goes. So we go out to watch him play, and we get very close to him because there weren't a lot of spectators there. And he was walking, I remember, between 10 and 11, and there was a cart path and just a rope between us and him, and he walked right in front of us. And this little 3-year-old kid sort of ducks under the rope and holds up his hat and asks for an autograph. But I don't think it was proper at that point for him to sign an autograph. I'm sure he did later, but at the time he just kind of walked by the little guy, and Tiger was striping tee shots, but he hit the odd squirrely one. He'd send his caddy over. He would send over Steve Williams to pick up his ball if it was in the rough, and he would go play the one that he hit in the fairway because he didn't want to interact with people that were, too close to him. He was very aloof that way. But, he changed the game. There's no question about that. We all know that.
Yeah.
Ron, I'm shocked I'm not in your dream foursome, but also, hey, I just want to say, hey, Dave,
Sorry.
You got kicked out by some schmuck named Lee, Jack, and Tiger. That's a tough one.
Yeah, I should have been thinking a little bit quicker on my feet than that one.
No,
it's all good.
That's good.
My
apologies.
I got one more, Ron. Either
Sure.
I want your best Riles story or Riles impression, whichever works.
Oh, I got a good Riles story, but I mean, there's a lot of stories that are offside with Riles. Riles impression. Well, guy, I'm watching the final of the lobstick final. And this, I'll get out of character now. The lobstick was, they used to actually put the lobstick final on the radio. And there was a radio personality in PA called Jack Sennan. And Jack Sennan was announcing the final, and he's driving around with the club pro, goodness knows who it was at that time. And they're following this group, and Riles is out there following, and he's got a giant watermelon with about 15 holes drilled in it, and there's 15 straws. So call Riles over and say, Riles, what are you carrying that watermelon around for? He looks at them and he says, tequila, guy. It's tequila. And that's just how he is. And anybody who knows Riles from PA knows that he's a one of a kind. He's an original guy. He's harmless. He loves golf, but he doesn't play anymore. And he always shows up sort of randomly and hassles people on the first tee. And yeah, he's done some offside things though.
He's the man. I'm obsessed with him.
Oh yeah, he's a character, that's for sure. That's the elk poacher.
All right, Ron. My last question here.
Sure.
Usually how we end this thing off with,
Okay.
just some advice for a young listener today, whether it's to be a a teacher or a doctor or a golf pro or whatever it may be in life that they want to do. Just some good thoughts and advice for them.
Well, if you're playing the game of golf, you're going to encounter people of all different sizes, shapes, personalities, ethnicity. And you have to learn how to respect everybody and respect people for who they are, and learn how to get along with people in an environment where it's just you and him or you and her. There aren't many sports out there where for 4 hours you can be in a twosome or threesome or a foursome with people you don't know. And when you're done, you either best friends with them, or at least you've encountered something with them that might change you personally. Golf is kind of sort of like life, because it's a game of a lifetime and there's not many out there you can play in your 90s. I think it's going to teach you things about how to treat other human beings that will only make you a better person. So if you're going to be a doctor, or you're going to be a firefighter, or you're going to be a hockey player, or you're going to be a wrestler, or if you're going to be, goodness knows what you want to be in your life. I just use wrestler as an example. It's kind of a silly reference. Golf teaches you about things that I think you don't get from any other sports. And you, as luck might have it, you might encounter somebody who for 4 hours enjoyed your company, and many years later, they might have an impact on you in some way. They might help you in a situation where you might be down and out and you just need a little bit of a push to get back up on your feet. Or they might be somebody who owns a big business and you might end up working for them. So I think golf is unique that way. And I would just tell any young people out there playing the game that just respect golf, respect people who you're playing with, and keep your emotions under control, and it teaches you to become a better person. Well
said. Ron, we appreciate your time today. This was a lot of fun. I think this is long overdue. You're a legend in yourself. I'm looking forward to meeting you at some point down the road here. I am in PA next weekend, actually, not golfing, hockey, but
nice.
I'll be up there. Thanks for your time today, Ron. I appreciate it.
All right. You're welcome. Thanks a lot for allowing me in.